Hey everyone, today I'm going to be teaching you how to RNG the RNG Celebi or the Colosseum Pikachu from the Pokemon Colosseum Bonus Disc from Japan. Now this is the bonus disc you would get for pre-ordering Pokemon Colosseum, very similar to how we got the Jirachi bonus disc in America. Now, there are a few prerequisites to this, and I will note that neither the Pikachu nor the Celebi can be shiny, so don't go into that hoping to get a shiny Celebi or Pikachu from this disc. The main purpose of this would be to do a cool and unique RNG and also to get a Celebi with a good stats and a good nature for maybe competitive play in Gen 3, 4, or 5, as this is the only legitimate way to get Celebi anymore in those games. Now, there are going to be a few requirements to this. One is that you have to have Pokemon Colosseum in Japanese and a save file with it that is completed with 48 purified shadow Pokemon, which, if you haven't played it before, is literally all of them. You're also going to need this bonus disc. You're also going to need a GBA to GameCube link cable. You're also going to need a Nintendo Wii or GameCube capable of playing Japanese Pokemon Colosseum and this bonus disc, as well as a memory card. Now, the memory card doesn't have to be in Japanese, but it cannot have any English or European save files on them. They use a different format, so that's very important. You could just either buy an extra memory card or hopefully have one that isn't very useful to you. So that's important to keep in mind. If you do try to create a save file with Colosseum, it will erase all of your old save files, so keep that in mind. You're going to need at least 2 Japanese GBA Pokemon games. Both of these games must have beaten the Elite Four and be saved in a Pokemon Center somewhere. They also should have only 5 Pokemon in the party. I recommend Ruby and Sapphire because these are the fastest games to beat. Emerald has a slightly longer story than Ruby and Sapphire, although it might be easier to beat the Elite Four in that game. And Fire and Leaf Green have to complete the entire Sevi Island story, and that takes a while, so I would recommend not using those at all. Also, there's no cloning glitch in Fire Red and Leaf Green that I know of, and you actually need a lot of rare candies for this. You're also going to need 5,000 Poke Coupons in 2 of the GBA games. You need at minimum 2 GBA games. It can be helpful to have more, but you need at least 2, and in 2 of them you need 5,000 Poke Coupons. This is done by grinding the Mount Battle Challenge for Poke Coupons with the team from your GBA game registered in the game while the GBA game is plugged in. This will get you all of those coupons that you can use to redeem a Pikachu in those games. This Pikachu is used both for advancing frames and figuring out our initial seed. Last but not least, on the game side, you're going to need a bunch of rare candies. I would say 20 to 30 rare candies. There are multiple ways to do this, but I made a video on how to do the Ruby and Sapphire item glitch, where you can clone a bunch of rare candies using mail and stuff, so you might want to check that out. And that's only for Japanese Ruby and Sapphire as well. The Emerald cloning glitch works as well if you're using Emerald. Also, Zigzagoon pickup farming works very well in Ruby Sapphire and Fire Red and Leaf Green because rare candies % chance doesn't change with the level. Out of game, you're going to need both XDCheck and XDPokemon, which are Japanese programs made by Genzaru. I will post translations of these in the description because they are completely in Japanese, but I will also fully explain how to utilize them in this tutorial. Last but not least, you're going to need this frame calculator tool. This is I'll also post a translation of this and a link in the description. It has a password. It's password locked, and I'll post the password as well in the description. I don't know why it's password locked. It's not like it's secret. The guy actually just posts the password on their website, so... But yeah, that's it. I believe that's all of the prerequisites you need. So with that out of the way, I'm going to be going over how you do frame advances in this game. Okay, so there are several ways to advance frames in this game, and so I'm going to cover all of them in this section of the video before I actually show you the RNG, and that's because the way you advance frames in this is sort of weird. So let's begin. So the first method to advance frames, and these are all consistent, is accepting a Celebi. So I'm going to show you footage of that now. So accepting Celebi advances 29,283 frames. This can be done up to 47 times because you can only get 48 Celebis per game. However, I don't recommend doing this method a lot. Basically, the guy just talks to you, you hit yes to his prompt, and then you turn on your GBA and it'll connect. Now, I don't recommend doing this a lot because you can only receive one Celebi per completed save file of Ruby and Sapphire, right? So if you had to receive 5 Celebis, you'd have to have 5 completed Japanese copies of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. So I personally recommend having this to only 1 because you will have 2 games anyway. So you need to have 2 completed games anyway. So you hit yes at this prompt after Celebi comes down, and Celebi will be in your party, and that advances the frames. Now, luckily, there are lots of other ways to advance frames, but there's a chance you might have to advance using this method because of the way the calculator works, and we'll get into that later. But let's cover the next. All right, so the next method is essentially the same. It's going to be rejecting Celebi. So that involves going back into the right box again, hitting yes to this man's prompt here. He's just basically asking if it is okay to receive a Celebi. Turn your GBA on, and rejecting Celebi will advance 42,488 frames. This can be done an infinite number of times. All that needs to happen is you need to be saved in a Pokemon Center with 5 Pokemon in your party, ready to accept the Celebi. And at the prompt last time where we hit yes, you just have to hit no here. So Celebi is going to show up. A little box is going to come up. Just say no there. You can use the B button, and Celebi will fly away. This can be done an infinite number of times, and I think it's a very good way to do frame advances. Okay, so the next way to advance frames is going to be try to accept Celebi, but this time there are 6 Pokemon in your party. So I like to do this one immediately after receiving a Pikachu, just because usually your party will already be full. But basically, save in a Pokemon Center with 6 Pokemon in your party and connect as if you were trying to receive or reject a Celebi. Logan here, the old man talking to you, will tell you that there are too many Pokemon in your party and Celebi has to leave. Come back when you are more prepared. This advances 32,048 frames. And Celebi will come down and fly away after he scolds you. And that's it. This can also be done an infinite number of times and is another extremely useful way to advance frames. Okay, so the next method is going to be receiving a Celebi but turning it off before you can actually receive it. This advances 42,535 frames and can also be done infinitely like the last 2 methods. So proceed to accepting your Celebi like normal. Turn your GBA on, and I'm going to point out exactly when you're supposed to be turning your GBA off, so don't worry about that. So we're going to go all the way up until the prompt where it actually asks to if you want the Celebi. This is another very useful way. Can be done infinitely. The only downside is, like most of these, it takes a long time. So right here, it asks you if you want the Celebi. You're going to hit yes, but then immediately after hitting yes, turn it off. You'll get this error message where it says GBA. Then Celebi will fly away. And that's how you do this advance. Another extremely useful way to do advances. Okay, so the next way to do frame advances is going to be receiving a Pikachu on the GBA or on the memory card for your GameCube game and removing it. So for the GBA, you go to the bottom option and turn it on here to receive your Pikachu. Now, when you're doing this, it's going to say OK on the GBA screen. Immediately after it says OK, and you hit A to advance the screen here. I'll wait a moment. All right, so right here it says OK. Hit A, turn the GBA off. And then it will ask you a yes or no prompt. Just hit the top option, which is yes. And this advances at 7 frames. Now for the GameCube version of this, all you have to do is pick the top option and remove the memory card after you say yes. Both of these advance 7 frames. Now the final way to advance frames is by completely accepting a Pikachu on the GameCube. This advances 27 frames. I actually don't have footage of this, but you can only do it once per save file. And the reason we're disconnecting the Pikachu is that also can only be done once per game save file. So you're going to have to really make sure you because if you accept it, then you can't continue to do the frame advances. So always make sure you're turning it off and not actually receiving the Pikachu on one of your games. And we need to receive Pikachu on the other to actually find our seed. But I'll get more into that a bit later. Now, there are a few other inconsistent methods, I'll call them. There's an option to receive a PP Max and a Master Ball from the top option. The PP Max you get as the first reward before the Pikachu for Colosseum. Like, it'll put them into your Colosseum memory card. Supposedly both of these advance 20 frames, but it actually always screwed up my RNG. So I would not actually do it if I was you, but that's just me. And then we're going to move on to the inconsistent waiting method. So for this method, you're going to advance like normal until you get to the Celebi. And so when Celebi floats down here, you're going to have to be able to receive it instead of just being the six-party thing. Before the final text box, before the yes or no prompt, when Celebi flies at you. So as you can see, Celebi flies at me here. Before it does this, if we move a little bit back, there's one text box where Celebi will just kind of float there, going up and down. This advances a lot of frames, but it does it very inconsistently. So right here, this text box, right? Just don't hit A on it, and Celebi will float up and down. This advances around 2,792 frames, and these frames are consumed every 90 to 110 visual frames. So that sounds kind of confusing, but basically the way it works is there are two types of frames, right? There are video frames, right? This game plays at 60 frames per second. And then there are RNG frames, which is just how much, like whatever state the game is at, advances, right? And that's not tied to visual frames in this game, right? So basically every 90 seconds, not 90 seconds, excuse me, every 90 visual frames, so that's around, 1.5 seconds, it will advance 2,700 in-game frames. Now, this is useful if your seed is really, really far away and you can't accept like 5,000 Pikachus to advance your frame, right? You just can't do it. Now, the thing about this is it is inconsistent, and after you do the advancement, you actually have to receive a Celebi or a Pikachu to figure out your new frame. So personally, I only recommend doing this if you're very picky about your spread that you want and you have enough cartridges to actually receive more than one Celebi to determine your new current frame. Other than that, I think this is actually a pretty good way to do the RNG. In terms of quick amounts of advancements, right? The other methods are all very, very slow, right? And they're not passive, right? You have to count how many Pikachu, how many Celebi, how many you accept, reject, turn off, disconnect, etc. You have to count all of that, right? This is passive. You just kind of leave the Celebi floating here for a long time. And with all of the ways to actually advance the frame covered, we're going to go into the actual RNG itself. Okay, so we're on the main part of the bonus disc, and we're just going to hit A to actually load up this section. This is the one that will give you the Pikachu and the Celebi. It'll take you to a start screen first. You just hit A or start there to actually move on to the main window. Now, before we do any RNG at all, what we're actually going to want to do is go over and receive a Celebi on our Colosseum save file. This Celebi is actually pretty useless. If you have more than one GameCube or Wii that can actually play this the Japanese Colosseum, then you can actually check this Celebi stats to find your initial seed, I think, but I'm not positive. So I would actually just stick to the Pikachu method that I'm about to show you. So once this Celebi is received, we can now receive Celebis on our GBA games. So after this is done, we're going to want to go into the left menu option here and receive a Pikachu on our GBA game fully, right? So we don't want to do like any frame advancements, right? So this is going to be how we determine our initial seed. So you go into the left menu, you go down one to the part that says GBA, and then it'll ask you to connect your GBA here. And you just kind of go through the text boxes, hitting yes. Yes is always the top option, by the way. If you can read Japanese, it says hi. So right here, it's the top option. actually receive your Pikachu, and now we need to go to the GBA game. It'll do a little save here. You can say yes or no to that prompt, it doesn't matter. And then just go to the main menu, and now we try to determine our initial seed. Now, after we receive the Pikachu, just go into your game and check out the... Oops. Oh. And check out the Pikachu's stats and nature. So, these stats are not enough alone to help us determine what its actual IVs are, because what we need to do is figure out its individual values. So we can do that by leveling it up with some rare candies, and also using a stat calculator. Okay, so after some time has passed, I've got this Pikachu to level 100, and it's really simple to figure out its stats from here using an IV calculator. So I'm going to do that right here. So we're going to type Pikachu. We're going to type its nature in. Its nature is in Japanese. If you can't see it, I would recommend, if you can't read Japanese or don't know what it is, I would recommend going to Bulbapedia and scrolling down to the nature one. I happen to know this is mild. I'm going to change its stats here, default row, and we just type in its stats. 183, 119. 78, 145, 94, 185. And calculate. And you should get the exact IVs. Now, sometimes you can do this at lower levels, like, you know, if you do this at level 50, it'll tell you the next level to level it up to, or whatever EVs. But the point is, you just need to figure out its exact IVs. And once you've done that, you can actually turn the game off. You don't need to save the Pikachu at level 100. You just need to use this information so you can know its exact IVs. Okay, once you've got the Pokemon's exact IVs down, you're going to enter them into XDCheck. Now, there's a few things. Again, XDCheck is in Japanese. I have the translation of it in the description. So the first thing you're going to do is click this bubble right here. Okay, then you're going to type the exact IVs into this box. So you put them in both the left and the right box. So as you can see, my Pikachu's IVs were 3, 4, 22, 27, 9, and 0. You just put both of them in all of that. You don't actually even have to select the nature, but then hit search, and you should get a very, very small amount of results. Now, as you can see, there's a bunch of information going on here, but the main thing is, this is the natures column. Just pick the one that matches your nature. So this is mine. And we have 3 values here that seem confusing, but they're actually not really. So this is the seed the Pikachu was generated on. This is the seed the Pikachu will, the game will be on after receiving the Pikachu. So we're going to pick this. This is effectively our new initial seed. With our new initial seed copied, we're going to go over to XDPokemon. So there's a few things to note about XDPokemon. First, we have to check this box here. Second is this box. This is where we paste our seed. Pink. Third is these 3 boxes down here. Now, this is basically how many frames we're willing to advance. I would set this to a lot. I would set this to well over 1 million. So I'll put it like to here. Just added a couple more zeros there. This box is how many frames the game will automatically advance. Now, there's only 2 different values we should ever be having in here, right? So basically what this means is when you receive Celebi, there's always going to be a set number of frames that occur before receiving Celebi. Now, you might think it is the 2000, it's 29, 29,283 frames from accepting a Celebi, but that's actually not true. It's 5 less than that. This is because the game advances 29,278 frames before receiving Celebi, and then once you accept Celebi, 5 extra frames are advanced. So if you're going to be receiving a Celebi, and your goal is to actually RNG the Celebi itself, you type 29278 into here. Then you type the search parameters for your IVs. And then this box here is what will let you pick the nature. So you can actually click it and multi-select all the natures you want. This here is the ability section. Celebi only has one ability. This is for XD, so ignore that. This is for the gender, again, ignore that. This is for the hidden power type if you care about that. And then that's actually all the options that matter. And then hit search. And you're going to get results. And we can stop here, actually. So these are all the results for the basically 30-ish frames for my Celebi. As you can see here, I have a bold natured Celebi about 1 million frames in. That's actually pretty low. Now, if you're doing Pikachu, you do the same exact thing, except in this box, instead of this number I've got here, you put 2. Because for Pikachu, it advances 2 frames, then the Pikachu's generated, and then 5 frames are generated. So you would get basically the same thing, except for this Pikachu. So they're actually generated in the same exact method, right? So I might actually even want this one, or this one, right? For Pikachu, this is naive. That's not a bad Pikachu nature. This one, I think, is timid, so that's actually also not a bad Pikachu nature, if I was actually going for the Pikachu. But I'm not. I'm going for Celebi. So we're going to paste that back, and we're going to regenerate that. So now at this point, we know exactly what we want, and we're going to copy this number, which is the amount of frame advances we have to do, and we're going to put that into this tool here. So put the number of frames here. Now I'm going to begin explaining what this tool does. Okay, so this is basically a calculator to get to the exact number of frame advancements you need to get done, right? So assuming you're not going to use any inconsistent advancement, like waiting at the Celebi screen, every other type of frame advancement I've talked about is consistent, right? Receiving Celebi, rejecting Celebi, trying to receive Celebi with 6 Pokemon in your party, turning the GBA off while you're receiving a Celebi, receiving Colosseum Pikachu, receiving GBA Pikachu, receiving the PP Max. They're all consistent. They always advance the same number of frames. This is the settings tab. I would not mess with this tab at all. This just tells you how many frames everything is advanced. And you can adjust it. For some reason, if it advances differently for you, you can adjust that number. But that's it. I would ignore it. I would not touch this tab. So you paste the amount of frames you want to advance here, and then you paste your options, right? So for Pikachu advancements, this is extremely slow. If you cannot receive Pikachu in Colosseum, this is extremely slow. This means you accept a Pikachu and turn the GBA off, right? This is probably close to 40 seconds per actual advancement. Maybe a little faster if you're really fast on your text messaging. I like to cut this one down. I cut this down to 50 times because it's very slow. Then for this one, this is the point max or PP max. I set this to 0 because this is it just didn't work for me. It would mess up everything, so I would not do this. This is receiving Pikachu permanently in Colosseum. Now, here's something to keep in mind. Receiving Pikachu permanently in Colosseum advances by 27 frames. However, receiving Pikachu and removing the memory card before it has time to save actually advances the same number of frames as GBA Pikachu. This advances 7 frames, and it's much faster than GBA Pikachu. If I wasn't lazy and I had the actual ability to do this, I would have actually cranked up the amount of Pikachu advances I'd be willing to do. Also, it's important to keep in mind this advances 27, which is not a value you can actually hit any other way. So it's just kind of important to keep that in mind. Same with point max, it's 20. You can't normally advance that amount of frames, so some spreads might be impossible to hit without one of these two. This is turning the GBA off while receiving Celebi. I like to set this to 100 because it's not too slow, but it advances a lot of frames is basically my point. This one is receiving Pikachu, or not Pikachu, wow. This is receiving Celebi with 6 Pokemon in your party. This is the fastest one. You want to do as many of these as possible. This one is rejecting Celebi. This one's also pretty fast. And then this one is accepting Celebi. I'm going to set this to 5 because that's how many GBA completed games I have. You should set this also to how many, and I'm sorry, set it to how many completed games you have, with the exception of the one you're trying to actually receive Celebi in. Because remember, once you receive Celebi in the game, if you want to receive another one, you have to beat the game again. So I have 5 completed games. 1 is going to receive Celebi. The rest are just potentially receiving it for advancements. And we hit generate. So there is a number of different types of advancements we're able to do here. So this spits out just like a bunch of results, basically, right? This one, for example, and it does it in the same order. And again, if you can't read it, you can actually just copy this, right? You can hit Control-C, and then you can go to translate.google.com, right? Oh. Click Japanese, paste, and it'll actually just tell you exactly. It's very, very simple. So the translation's funny too. 8 times with 6 animals. The 6 animals means the full party, by the way. So this one is receive Celebi, refuse Celebi, 8 times with a full party, basically. Error, pretty simple. So I like to go for there's 2 basically philosophies that I have, is the least amount of Pikachus, because again, I hate doing it. It takes so long. Or if you only have 1 or 2 completed games, the least amount of Celebis. And so what it's really going to come down to is probably the least amount of Celebis. So for example, this is a really good one. The Celebi receiving error does take a while, but it's pretty easy. You only have to receive 2 Pikachus. You don't have to receive any Celebis. So at this point, you should just pick whichever one you prefer. Whichever one will get you there most acceptably. And remember, if it says receive 0 Celebis, all that means is that you just received the 1 actual Celebi that you're getting. The 0 doesn't mean you'll get to that frame, but then there's no Celebis, right? This does not account for, because, right, we put this offset here already. This will not account for the final Celebi. So that's the most important thing to do. Now, once you've figured out which advancements you're going to do, we can jump right back into the game and actually do the final advancements. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to show everything, because this took me like an hour, probably like 40 minutes to an hour, to actually receive everything, but I'm just going to cover a little bit of the process. Now, so a few things to really keep in mind. You absolutely need to be saved in, so for example, this Pikachu I'm receiving here, right? It's on a different GBA game, because remember, you have to have 2 GBA games. One where you're going to be receiving the first permanent Pikachu, and then the reason you need a second one at all is just because it's just because you have to advance with another Pikachu. So this is a separate GBA game where I'm turning it off every time, and it's never received a Pikachu or a Celebi before in my life. Now, again, remember, in order to actually receive this Pikachu, you have to have 51, or it's 5,000. I have 5,100, but you have to have 5,000 Poke coupons on the game. So you got to get that twice, and you get like barely over 1,000 for completing Mount Battle. So it takes quite a while, probably like an hour, to get this many Poke coupons, and you have to do it on 2 GBA games. It sucks a lot. Now, also remember, you have to have at least 1 free spot in your party, and you need to be saved in a Pokemon Center in order to actually receive the Pikachu. For rejecting, accepting, having 6 Pokemon in your party, or the turning the GBA off while receiving Celebi, you also need to have saved in a Pokemon Center. And for the 6 Pokemon in your party, you obviously have to have a full party, so it kind of auto rejects the Celebi for you. But for the other ones, you need to have 5 Pokemon in your party and kind of either actually accept the Celebi in the case of actually receiving it, turn it off after receiving it in the case of, reject the communication error, or hitting no for the no one. But in that case, you still have to have 5 Pokemon in your party. Once all of that's done, it's pretty much just a matter of doing the math, like literally just using that calculator and then doing all of the actions. The way I like to do this is with a calculator. Now, so what I mean by this is I'll set up a calculator, and I'll type 1+1, and assuming I'm doing more than one advance, what I'll do is always increment this calculator in a specific point. So this is my first advance of this type of Celebi. This type of Celebi advancement here. And I'm going to always increment the counter in the same exact spot. And I start as 1+1. And so what's his face comes, he scolds me for having too many Pokemon, come back with, come back with less. And then I just do it again. Now, I personally like to do the advancement at this point when I turn the GBA on. So here, since this is my second advancement, I will hit enter. And this is kind of how I think it's best to do the advances. I think the most important thing is to make sure you're keeping count somehow outside of your head, so you don't actually lose place of what you're doing. And every time you do count, make sure you count in the same spot, because it's easier to remember that way. This just might be like my own memory techniques, but I think this is the best way to do it. And you know, if you're only doing 2 advances, you don't need to count, but I'm doing more than that, so much more than that. So yeah, as you can see, every time I turn the GBA on, I increment the counter. And I like to use just Windows Calculator, because once you set up the 1+1 like I did, you can just hit enter to continually increment it. And I think that's probably the last tip that I have, so we're just going to cut to me receiving the Celebi, because this took me over 40 minutes to do all of the advancements. That should give you an idea of how tedious this is. And I'm not going to show all of that or speed it up, because it's just too much. So I know this video is on my channel already, but this is just the video of me actually receiving the Celebi. If any of you have any more questions or anything like that, please leave it down below. I know it's a very tedious RNG, but it can be worth it, especially if you like Pokemon with good stats. And this is the only way to get a legitimate 5 IV Celebi in Gens 3, 4, or 5 at this point in time. Now, the only thing to note is that if you're more into written guides, I did one on Reddit, so I'll post that in the description or a pinned comment as well. And I've got basically the exact same guide, but in written format there. And that's mostly what I went off of for this. I did that as well. And it's important to just note that, you know, this isn't going to be for everyone. I know this is kind of a niche thing, but if you do this, please tweet me and show me the Celebi you got. I'd be super excited to see that. And any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.